This is the story of 5 teachers who crossed a line so unthinkable, so brutal, that it forces us to ask a question we never wanted to answer. How well do we really know the people we trust most? Stay with me, because these 7 stories will change the way you see the world. And if you want to dive deeper into the darkest corners of human nature, hit that subscribe button now. You won't want to miss what's coming. Chelsea Cook. Chelsea Watrous Cook was 32 years old, a high school teacher from Salt Lake County, Utah. Her students described her as cheerful, passionate, patient. She taught health and wellness at Skyridge High School, and to everyone who knew her, she seemed like a woman who had her life together. But behind that calm image was someone struggling to accept loss, heartbreak, and the painful reality that her marriage was over. Chelsea was married to Travis Cook, a firefighter. They had twins together, a boy and a girl, and for years they appeared to have a happy family. But by 2017, the relationship had started to fall apart. Travis filed for divorce, and it was finalized in early 2018. Shortly after, he began dating another woman, Lisa Violet Williams, 26 years old, from American Fork. Lisa was kind, warm, and quickly bonded with Travis's children. Chelsea, however, couldn't stand it. Friends and co-workers later said Chelsea was obsessed with Travis's new girlfriend. She would drive past their house, stalk Lisa's social media, and send angry text messages to Travis, accusing him of replacing her. By November 2018, the jealousy had turned into fury. On December 2, 2018, Chelsea went to Travis's apartment in Midvale under the excuse of dropping off medicine for one of their sick twins. It was a Sunday evening, and Travis, Lisa, and the kids were decorating their Christmas tree. When Chelsea arrived, Travis allowed her in, thinking it would just be a quick visit. But within minutes, everything changed. While Travis was in the other room, Chelsea walked into the living room where Lisa was helping the children hang ornaments. In one quick motion, Chelsea pulled out a gun she had hidden in her coat pocket. Without warning, she fired multiple shots at Lisa, hitting her in front of the children. Travis rushed into the room and tackled Chelsea to the ground, shouting for help. Neighbors called 911 after hearing the gunfire. Officers arrived within minutes to find Lisa critically wounded and Chelsea sitting quietly on the couch. She didn't resist arrest. She didn't cry. She just watched as paramedics tried to save Lisa's life. But it was too late. Lisa died at the scene. Chelsea was taken into custody that night. The case shocked the community, especially her students, who described her as kind and calm. No one could understand how their teacher, someone who taught about mental health and emotional control, could commit such a brutal act. At her trial in 2019, prosecutors said Chelsea's actions were driven by pure jealousy. They presented text messages where she called Lisa the other woman and wrote about wanting to make her pay. The defense argued that Chelsea suffered from postpartum depression and anxiety, saying she had lost control in a moment of emotional collapse. But the evidence was clear. She had planned it. She brought a gun, loaded it, and used it without hesitation. In May 2019, Chelsea Watrous Cook pleaded guilty to aggravated murder and aggravated burglary. She was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. During sentencing, Travis stood in court and faced her. His words were calm but firm. He said, "You took away the mother of my children's peace. You took away their innocence. You did this in front of them, and that's something no sentence can fix." Chelsea's father also spoke, saying his daughter's mental health had declined long before the shooting. He called it a tragedy for 2 families, and in many ways he was right. Today, Chelsea Watrous Cook remains in the Utah State Prison, serving her life sentence. Her twins, now older, are being raised by their father, who continues to work as a firefighter. The home where it all happened has long since been resold, but for the people of Midvale, that December night is not forgotten. It's a story of love turned toxic, of jealousy stronger than reason, and of how even those who teach peace can still lose themselves to rage. Amy Bishop. Dr. Amy Bishop was once a respected biology professor at the University of Alabama in Huntsville, brilliant, accomplished, and ambitious. She had a PhD from Harvard University and years of research experience. Students described her as intense but smart, the kind of teacher who pushed them to think harder. But beneath that academic success was a deep bitterness, a growing sense that the world was against her. By 2009, Amy's career had hit a wall. After years of teaching and research, she was denied tenure, the permanent position that protects professors from losing their jobs. It was the ultimate rejection for someone who had devoted her life to science. She appealed the decision several times, sending angry emails to university officials, but every request was denied. As the months passed, Amy became more paranoid, convinced that her colleagues were conspiring to ruin her life. On February 12, 2010, she walked into a faculty meeting with a 9mm handgun hidden inside her purse. Around the table sat 6 of her colleagues, professors and staff, who had worked alongside her for years. The meeting began normally. They discussed department budgets and future plans. Then, without warning, Amy stood up, pulled out the gun, and began firing. In seconds, she shot 6 people. 3 died instantly. Dr. Gopi Podila, the department chair, Dr. Maria Ragland Davis, and Dr. Adriel Johnson. The others, Dr. Joseph Leahy, Stephanie Monticciolo, and Luis Cruz Vera, were wounded but survived. Witnesses later said Amy's face showed no emotion. When the gun jammed, she calmly tried to reload it. When she couldn't, she walked out of the room, leaving chaos and screams behind her. Outside the building, she called her husband, James Anderson, and asked him to pick her up. He didn't know what she had done. Moments later, police stopped her near the university. She was arrested without resistance. When questioned, Amy said she didn't remember pulling the trigger. Investigators found that hard to believe. As they dug deeper into her past, a shocking discovery came to light. This wasn't Amy Bishop's first brush with violence. Back in 1986, when Amy was just 21, she had shot and killed her younger brother, Seth Bishop, inside their family home in Massachusetts. Amy claimed it was an accident, that she was trying to unload her father's shotgun and it went off. The case was ruled accidental and she was never charged. But after the 2010 shooting, Massachusetts authorities reopened the investigation and concluded that the original handling of the case had been highly unusual. Some officers back then had even described Amy as volatile and dangerous. In the days after the university shooting, Amy's husband told reporters he had no idea she owned a gun. He said she had been under enormous stress because of the tenure denial and felt betrayed by her department. Police later confirmed she had bought the handgun legally at a local pawn shop months earlier. Her trial took years to prepare. Prosecutors called it one of the worst workplace shootings in Alabama's history. They said Amy had planned everything, from choosing the location to bringing extra ammunition. The defense argued that she was mentally ill, suffering from paranoid schizophrenia and delusions. Her lawyers claimed she believed her colleagues were sabotaging her work and trying to destroy her family. In 2012, just before the trial began, Amy changed her plea to guilty in order to avoid the death penalty. She admitted to 3 counts of capital murder and 3 counts of attempted murder. The judge sentenced her to life in prison without the possibility of parole. Amy showed little emotion as the statements were read. When the judge asked if she had anything to say, she whispered, "I am sorry for what I did. I can't undo it." Today, Amy Bishop is serving her life sentence at the Julia Tutwiler Prison for Women in Wetumpka, Alabama. She spends most of her time in isolation, away from other inmates. Even now, she claims she doesn't fully remember the shooting, a statement experts still debate. Her case became a grim example of how pressure, failure, and untreated anger can explode into violence. A brilliant mind turned deadly in one moment of rage. From a Harvard-trained scientist to a convicted murderer, Amy Bishop's story shows how intelligence alone cannot save a person from their own darkness. Nancy Seaman. In May 2004, the quiet Detroit suburb of Farmington Hills, Michigan, was shaken by a brutal murder that seemed impossible to believe. The killer wasn't a career criminal or a stranger. She was a beloved teacher, a mother, and a woman her students looked up to. Her name was Nancy Ann Seaman, and the man she killed was her husband, the father of her 2 sons. Nancy Seaman was 46 years old, a respected Oakland County high school teacher who had been named Teacher of the Year. Her students loved her energy and kindness, and fellow teachers described her as patient, professional, and dedicated. But at home, behind the walls of her neatly kept suburban house, her marriage to Robert Seaman was falling apart. Robert, known as Bob, was 55 and worked as a sales manager. The couple had been married for more than 30 years, but by 2004 their relationship had turned bitter and cold. Friends said Nancy often complained about emotional abuse and controlling behavior. She claimed Robert criticized her constantly and even threatened to leave her. But prosecutors later said Nancy wasn't a victim of abuse. She was angry that her husband wanted to end the marriage. On the evening of May 10, 2004, everything reached its breaking point. That morning, Nancy bought a hatchet from a local hardware store. She told the cashier it was for a gardening project. But when police later recovered the store surveillance footage, it showed Nancy purchasing the weapon just hours before the killing. Proof that it was no spontaneous act. That night, after an argument about finances and their future, Nancy attacked her husband in their kitchen. Using the hatchet she had just bought, she struck him more than 20 times in the head and neck. Then, after he fell to the floor, she grabbed a knife and stabbed him repeatedly in the chest. The scene was horrific. Blood covered the walls, the counters, and even the ceiling. Forensic investigators later said it looked more like a crime of rage than self-defense. After killing Robert, Nancy tried to clean up. She wiped down surfaces, hid the weapons, and wrapped his body in a tarp. She later told police she panicked and didn't know what to do. Instead of calling 911, she drove to a store and bought paint and supplies, intending to cover the bloodstains. Detectives later found receipts showing she made these purchases less than 2 hours after the murder. When police arrived the next morning, after a call from Nancy's concerned colleagues, they found her sitting calmly in her living room. She admitted to the killing, but insisted it was self-defense. She told detectives that Robert had been violent for years and that she attacked him only after he grabbed her by the throat. However, investigators found no evidence of a struggle that supported her claim. There were no defensive wounds on Robert's hands, and Nancy herself had only a small bruise. The blood pattern suggested he was sitting or standing still when the first blow landed. Nancy's trial began in 2005, and it quickly divided public opinion. Many believed she was a battered wife who snapped after years of psychological abuse. Others saw a calculating woman who planned her husband's death to avoid a messy divorce. The prosecution's most damaging evidence was the hardware store video showing her buying the hatchet on the same day of the murder, calm, composed, and clearly in control. Prosecutors argued that Nancy had planned the attack after learning Robert intended to leave her and sell their home. They said she couldn't handle losing her lifestyle or her image as the perfect wife. The defense, meanwhile, painted Nancy as a victim who had been emotionally broken. They called psychologists who testified that she suffered from battered woman syndrome, a condition caused by years of abuse and fear. After weeks of testimony, the jury found Nancy guilty of first-degree premeditated murder. She was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. The verdict shocked many of her supporters, who believed she had been treated unfairly because of gender bias and misunderstanding of domestic abuse. In the years since her conviction, Nancy has maintained her innocence from her prison cell at the Women's Huron Valley Correctional Facility. She has written letters and spoken to journalists, insisting she acted in self-defense. Her case has been featured in multiple documentaries, including Snapped and Women Behind Bars, where she described living in constant fear of her husband. But the evidence remains clear: the purchase of the hatchet, the brutality of the attack, and the attempts to hide what happened. Whether she was a victim pushed too far or a murderer trying to protect her image, only Nancy truly knows what happened that night. For the people of Michigan, her story remains one of the most chilling examples of how rage, fear, and control can destroy even the most respected life. Pamela Smart. In the spring of 1990, the small town of Derry, New Hampshire, became the center of one of the most sensational murder cases in American history. A case that blurred the line between love, manipulation, and murder. At the heart of it was Pamela Smart, a 22-year-old high school media coordinator who used her influence over students to commit a deadly crime. Pamela Smart was young, attractive, and ambitious. She had recently graduated from college and landed a job at Winnacunnet High School in Hampton. She was married to Greg Smart, a 24-year-old insurance salesman she had met while working at a radio station. At first, their relationship seemed perfect: young love, a shared passion for music, and dreams of a future together. But behind the smiles and newlywed life, cracks were already forming. By early 1990, their marriage was strained. Greg had confessed to cheating during a business trip, and Pamela, feeling hurt and insecure, began seeking emotional comfort elsewhere. That's when she met Billy Flynn, a 15-year-old student who volunteered in her school's media program. Pamela was his supervisor, and soon became much more than that. What started as friendly mentorship quickly turned into an illegal sexual relationship. Pamela told Billy she was unhappy in her marriage and that Greg was controlling her life. The teenage boy, already infatuated, believed everything she said. Over time, Pamela convinced him that the only way they could truly be together was if Greg was out of the picture. Billy, eager to please her, agreed, but he didn't act alone. He recruited his best friend, Patrick Randall, along with two other teenagers, Vance Lattime Jr. and Raymond Fowler, to help. Together, the boys planned the murder under Pamela's direction. She coached them, telling them where to go, what time Greg would be home, and how to make it look like a robbery. On May 1st, 1990, the plan was set in motion. Pamela left work and made sure she was at a meeting when the attack would happen to give herself an alibi. That evening, the boys drove to the Smarts' condominium in Derry. Billy and Patrick entered the home while Greg was watching TV. A struggle broke out, and Patrick held Greg down while Billy shot him in the head. The bullet killed him instantly. Afterward, they staged the scene to look like a burglary and fled. When Pamela returned home that night, she pretended to be horrified. She called 911, crying and screaming that her husband had been murdered. Police arrived and began investigating, initially believing it could have been a random robbery. But soon, things didn't add up. Greg's wallet and wedding ring were missing, yet the house showed no signs of forced entry. Detectives began to suspect someone close to him, and Pamela's overly emotional public behavior drew attention. Within weeks, rumors spread among students that Pamela had been involved with Billy Flynn. Detectives began interviewing his friends, and one of them broke down, revealing everything. They said Pamela had manipulated Billy into killing Greg, promising they would be together afterward. Police then used a secret informant, a friend of Pamela's named Cecilia Pierce, to record conversations with her. In those tapes, Pamela never admitted the murder outright, but made suspicious statements like, "If they tell the truth, I'm done." The evidence was enough for an arrest. Pamela Smart was charged with first-degree murder, conspiracy to commit murder, and witness tampering. The trial began in 1991, and it became a media circus, the first ever televised trial in US history. The prosecution portrayed Pamela as a manipulative seductress who preyed on a teenage boy and used him as a weapon. The defense argued that she never asked anyone to kill Greg and that Billy acted on his own out of jealousy. But the jury didn't believe her. The recorded conversations, the testimonies from Billy and his friends, and Pamela's lack of remorse painted a clear picture. On March 22, 1991, she was found guilty on all charges and sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. Billy Flynn and Patrick Randall, who were both teenagers at the time, pleaded guilty to second-degree murder and received 40 years to life. In later interviews, Billy admitted, "I loved her. I thought I was doing the right thing." Pamela Smart, now in her mid-50s, continues to serve her sentence at the Bedford Hills Correctional Facility in New York. Over the years, she has earned a master's degree, written letters of apology to Greg's family, and claimed she was wrongly portrayed by the media. She still insists she never asked anyone to kill her husband, though the courts have never believed her. Her story has inspired movies, documentaries, and books, including the film To Die For starring Nicole Kidman, which was loosely based on her life. But behind all the attention lies a simple truth. A teacher abused her power, a child was manipulated, and a man lost his life because of desire and deceit. Pamela Smart remains a reminder that evil can wear a professional smile, and that sometimes the person who seems the most innocent is the one hiding the darkest intentions. Carolyn Warmus. In the late 1980s, New York's quiet suburbs were shaken by a murder that sounded more like a Hollywood thriller than real life. The killer was Carolyn Warmus, a 25-year-old elementary school teacher who appeared elegant, educated, and charming. But behind her confident smile was an obsession so consuming that it ended with one woman dead and Carolyn branded forever as the fatal attraction killer. Carolyn was born into wealth. Her father, Thomas Warmus, was a successful insurance executive who built a fortune in Michigan. She grew up surrounded by money, luxury, and privilege, the kind of life that often hides emotional emptiness. From a young age, Carolyn was intelligent and ambitious, graduating from Columbia University with a master's degree in education. She wanted to teach and make a name for herself in New York's upper-class society. In 1987, she landed a job at Edgemont Elementary School in Greenburgh, New York. That's where she met Paul Solomon, a fellow teacher. Older, charming, and married. He and his wife, Betty Jean Solomon, had a teenage daughter and seemed like the picture of a normal family. But behind the scenes, Paul and Betty's marriage was rocky. When Carolyn entered the picture, Paul began an affair that would change all their lives forever. Paul and Carolyn started meeting secretly after work, dining at fancy restaurants, and spending nights in hotels. Carolyn fell deeply in love, but Paul soon realized the relationship was spiraling out of control. He tried to end it several times, but Carolyn refused to let go. She became jealous, possessive, and obsessed with the idea that Paul belonged to her alone. By January 1989, Carolyn had reached a breaking point. She learned that Paul had reconciled with his wife and wanted to end things permanently. Friends said Carolyn began talking about how Betty Jean was in the way. On the night of January 15, 1989, while Paul claimed to be out having drinks with friends, Betty Jean was home alone in their Greenburgh townhouse. Around 9:30 p.m., someone entered the house and shot her 9 times with a .25 caliber pistol. The killer left behind almost no evidence. No fingerprints, no forced entry. The only clue was a glove left near the body. When police arrived, they found Betty Jean's lifeless body in the living room, blood on the walls, and spent shell casings scattered around. At first, investigators looked at Paul Solomon, the husband, because it's almost always the spouse. But his alibi checked out. Then, as detectives dug deeper, One name kept coming up: Carolyn Warmus. Phone records showed that Carolyn had called Paul's home multiple times that evening, even after Betty Jean had been shot. Witnesses also reported seeing Carolyn's car near the Solomon house that night. When police searched her belongings, they found a receipt for a gun purchased under a false name just weeks earlier, the same caliber used in the murder. They also found a pair of gloves similar to the one left at the crime scene. Carolyn denied everything. She said she was innocent and had spent the night meeting a friend at a bar. But the evidence kept piling up. The story of a young, glamorous teacher murdering her lover's wife made national headlines. Reporters compared the case to the movie Fatal Attraction, which had come out just 2 years earlier, a film about a woman's obsession with a married man that turns deadly. Her first trial in 1991 ended in a hung jury, with jurors split over whether the evidence was strong enough to convict her. But prosecutors weren't finished. They retried her in 1992, presenting new evidence, including phone records, gun receipts, and witnesses who said she had confessed indirectly. This time, the jury found her guilty of second-degree murder and illegal possession of a firearm. The judge sentenced Carolyn Warmus to 25 years to life in prison. During sentencing, she showed little emotion. She continued to insist that she had been framed and that Paul Solomon had set her up. Paul, for his part, denied any involvement and later left teaching altogether. Over the years, Carolyn appealed several times, claiming new evidence and faulty investigation. In 2017, after nearly 25 years behind bars, she was granted parole. She walked out of Bedford Hills Correctional Facility, the same prison where Pamela Smart is still serving time. Now in her 60s, Carolyn lives quietly in New York, avoiding interviews but maintaining that she was wrongfully convicted. Her case remains one of the most famous teacher-related murder stories in America, a tragic reminder of how love can twist into obsession and how desire, when mixed with jealousy, can lead even the most educated mind down a deadly path. Carolyn Warmus once taught children how to learn and grow, but in the end, it was her own inability to let go that destroyed everything she had: her freedom, her career, and another woman's life. These 5 women stood before classrooms and commanded respect. They shaped futures, inspired dreams, and taught the difference between right and wrong. But somewhere along the line, something slipped, something dark enough to shatter the very trust they were meant to protect. Their stories are reminders that even those we look up to can hide shadows we never see coming. If you want more stories that reveal the truth behind the people we think we know, make sure you like, subscribe, and turn on notifications.